Hey, hey, hey. Hey, hey, hey. What's up, 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 Big Connect? Whoa, 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 what's up? No, no, no. Big Connect! Wow!
This video is over 15 reasons why the end of Bitcoin is near, or as we know it. And this is coming from someone who's 100x their investment in Bitcoin, so I hope that adds some credibility to what we're about to list. And we did predict the crash this year, obviously, as well. I think that's something that adds some credibility. And this is quite a bold claim when sentiment is just way too positive, and I guess that's the first point. So let's start with point number one. Sentiment is just sky high too positive. There's not a single negative person.
Yeah, everything I see about Bitcoin is super positive. If you ever watch CNBC, for example, there's no negativity at all. I saw the other day on X somebody saying Bitcoin's going to $20 million a coin. It's people are saying, you've got to buy Bitcoin. It's going to give you generational wealth. And of course, that all was true for anyone who bought back in 2011, 2012, 2013 when I was buying, because I love the concept of Bitcoin to get rid of the banks and to get rid of the permission that you need to use the financial system. The concept is absolutely brilliant. But when you look at the sentiment now, you've got to say that anyone who wanting to buy Bitcoin is already in there, and they're hodling right now, looking for it to go to these amazing highs, $1 million, $2 million, $10 million. I would say because you're seeing such sentiment, there's not much upside left, because the sentiment must be 99% positive. And whenever you see that kind of sentiment in any financial instrument, then it's time for at least a significant drawdown, which of course we've seen many times in Bitcoin since it first came into existence. We've seen many 50, 60, 70% drawdowns where people thought it was the end. Of course, it never was. It bounced back bigger and better. And, nobody's saying that's not what's going to happen this time. But I think what we're saying is, because of the sentiment in particular and other reasons, we're going to see a very significant pullback in Bitcoin. It's long overdue. If you look at the chart, it's you can see how fast it's got to these kind of highs. And it's normal for these things to at least take a pause, and the pullback will be brutal.
Yeah. And I'll just add into that point. I mean, the sentiment so positive. Where are, if everyone's already in and everyone's being so positive, where are these new buyers going to come from? I mean, another point that I've got here, which we're going to mention later, but if you took every basically US dollar and it went into Bitcoin, the market cap's like 2.2 trillion and crypto in general is like 3, it would basically only 10x from here. So these figures that you've just mentioned that people are saying are just ridiculous. So you might see, a 10x in Bitcoin, but there are so many better opportunities for investments, and there's so many different cryptos. And I mean, everyone was scared in the last year, with Ethereum. I think that's exactly what we're saying. Probably what will happen with Bitcoin: growth will be slow, gains won't be as much. All the major gains are over, and it could end up being a bit like the Ethereum story of this year, where it's kind of really not done anything. Everyone's panicking because it's not growing as much as some of the other ones. And as we're talking about this adoption is definitely happening. No one's gonna deny that. They're just alternatives. There are better ways to make money in crypto and in commodities and make faster gains, and that's time is money as well. Yeah, and then we've talked about Monero. And I think something like that could be, a true, and this gets onto another point in a second. So I'll say that, which is about, being a true crypto and what Satoshi actually imagined. And I'll let you discuss that point. But just to back up that point is basically Bitcoin dominance. It is still absolutely plummeting. And if that continues to be the case, adoption's going up, Bitcoin dominance is plummeting, which suggests, alternative coins have bigger gains, and the growth of Bitcoin won't be as much as people are anticipating or are being told. But please touch on privacy element. What was Bitcoin actually set up for? And now it's just a store of money. Why not being something else that's a store of money? Why would someone choose Bitcoin?
I think Satoshi's original idea was to have an alternative kind of money that cut out the banks, it meant you didn't need some central authority to make payments to spend your money, which is, of course, a fantastic idea that I agree with 100%. But all the focus on Bitcoin recently, instead of it being used to actually make day-to-day transactions, you can't, at least as far as I know, go to the supermarket and pay for your groceries in Bitcoin,
Exactly.
pay your mortgage or your rent in Bitcoin. There's actually very little real world use cases for Bitcoin. So that was what it was supposed to be for. And of course, it was supposed to at least have some degree of privacy. The blockchain, you can see the transactions, but you don't know who is making the transaction. Very few people actually keep Bitcoin in private wallets, which of course is what you need to do. If you want to own the Bitcoin, if you want to have privacy, you have to use a private wallet. You can't keep it on an exchange. But I would suggest, I don't know the figures, but probably more than 90% of people keep their Bitcoin on an exchange, which of course is very convenient. But it means that it's no different to keeping your money in a bank. Your money can be frozen, it can be seized in an exchange, just in the same way it can be seized in a bank. So if you haven't paid your taxes, if you're going through a divorce, or if you're in litigation, whoever is suing you can go and get a freezing order from an exchange and freeze your money just the same as they can freeze your money in a bank. So that people have shot themselves in the foot by using it that way. And instead of finding new use cases for Bitcoin, which I would very much like to see, where you could go to Amazon and buy things with Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, that's not happening. All the focus is on these institutional uses, having ETFs and so on for speculation. And all that's being encouraged with Bitcoin is speculation, not day-to-day use. So even the Bitcoin, when it first started, and the reason it started to grow was it was used for buying things that would be considered illegal in these dark web markets. Like the famous one was Silk Road, where the owner actually ended up in prison for years and was pardoned by Trump.
Yeah.
But that was that was how Bitcoin started to grow, because it was used for all these illegal transactions, people buying drugs and so on. But nowadays they don't use Bitcoin in these dark web markets. They've all changed to Monero, because Monero does offer real privacy. And for that reason, it's been banned in many countries and banned off many exchanges. So I would suggest that coins like Monero, and even to a lesser extent the Bitcoin Cash, are actually more useful for day-to-day transactions than Bitcoin. So that's the main point on.
Everyone's like, oh, limited supply, it's amazing. Whereas, like we were saying earlier, all these alternatives, there are limited supply options, and that's where the value is. The value, and you touched on there, is basically the blockchain, private wallets. We're not saying this is going to go. We're saying that's where the value is, and therefore, crypto as a whole, sure, but Bitcoin itself, maybe not anymore. Yeah.
The point is that anyone can start a cryptocurrency with a limited amount of coins. So it's not, although Bitcoin is limited to 21 million Bitcoin, there's no limit to someone else starting an alternative to Bitcoin. And of course, there are thousands already. Bitcoin is just the one that is getting the most traction. But there's not, like very similar to fiat currencies nowadays, there's nothing backing it up. There's no, you can't go and exchange your Bitcoin for, precious metal or any other type of commodities. So, I think if you had to make a choice, ultimately for something, if you to make a choice for an investment for the next 100 years for future generations of your family, do you choose Bitcoin, this digital money, or do you choose something that's been around and been money for 5,000 years, like gold or silver?
Yeah, no, that's definitely touching on the very first point about sentiment. I mean, is just doing the opposite of what the crowd is doing has been the best way of operating since the dawn of the stock market and charts and everything in general. And Warren Buffett would tell you the same thing. He's not really pro Bitcoin, but I would be interested to see now what his views are around the blockchain and wallet. That's definitely something that you've advocated for in previous videos, is just doing the opposite of what the crowd are doing.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to do what you don't feel like doing. And I think there are probably many people now who are very pleased with themselves at how much money they've made on Bitcoin, because let's face it, it's been an amazing speculation these last few years, and probably when it's at all-time highs, and it may go higher. We're not saying it's not going to go higher from here. We're people that don't feel like selling whatever investment it might be telling you it's time to sell when you don't feel like when nobody wants to buy something. Nobody wanted to buy Bitcoin even in the last pullback when it came back to I think
Exactly.
around 17,000 or maybe even a little less.
It was,
No,
I think, yeah, it was about that, and it also we can touch on this as well is the sort of chart patterns. I mean, it got to beautifully tap the 200 moving average at about 20,000 a Bitcoin, but yes, it got down to 16,000, and then it got back above the 200 moving average, tapped 17 or 20,000, and just went
well, there was some talk of the U.S. government buying Bitcoin,
and
and a
Ethereum,
lot of
yeah,
people were very excited about that. But I noticed yesterday the U.S. Treasury Secretary said they're not going to buy Bitcoin, but they're going to keep the Bitcoin that they've seized from what they say are criminals. So they've stolen a lot of Bitcoin from the public, which just shows that that can be done.
yeah,
It's not as safe as you may think it is. So they've seized a huge amount of Bitcoin, as have other governments. But the U.S. government said they're not going to sell that,
mm,
but they're certainly not going to buy Bitcoin. They're not going to sell their gold and buy Bitcoin, which of course would be the ultimate and stupid things to do.
yeah.
And it would nothing would surprise me with governments. But the U.S. Treasury Secretary said they're not going to do that. They're going to keep what they've already stolen
Interesting.
from
That's interesting as
various people,
well.
but they're not going to buy more.
Yeah, I mean, and just adding to that, I mean, obviously Ethereum has bounced from these kind of worrying, slow moves it was having, but that was probably because all these institutions have basically propped it back up, like, Trump and even his family office, and then all the people buying off the back of him. But, that fear that the people had because, it wasn't moving when other cryptos were moving, I think is definitely something we're going to see with Bitcoin, especially as this dominance falls. Yeah, and then just going on to other things to do with dormant wallets. I mean, you're someone who invested in Bitcoin at $300 and of over 100x your money, and you're moving things around now. But all these dormant wallets as well, they're moving stuff around. I mean, that was 8.6 billion moved from dormant wallets, the largest ever very recently.
It's
What have you seen on that?
it's very interesting to see some of these wallets moving, and you have to ask yourself what is going on with those. Are these people that just sat on a huge amount of wealth for perhaps a decade or more, or are they dormant wallets that someone's managed to hack, which is
Mm,
an interesting scenario if there's someone out there that's managed to hack and steal that amount of cryptocurrency, but the fact is that they're moving.
yeah,
They haven't the wallets of the Bitcoin's moved. That doesn't mean it's been sold.
yeah.
It's moved to another wallet. That's all we can say. But at
Mm,
some stage that it's going to be sold.
yeah. And just adding to what I'm reading here, there was a suspicious Bitcoin cash transaction that just occurred just before the move, which is suggesting that that's possibly a key compromise rather than a voluntary transfer as well, which is just more worry. We don't want to fearmonger here. We're mainly listing reasons,
Yeah,
but
it could well be because Bitcoin Cash and was a fork from the original Bitcoin. So everyone who had Bitcoin way back got basically free
mm,
Bitcoin Cash, which was rather nice to receive.
yeah.
But some exchanges may not have distributed the Bitcoin Cash, or some people may not have been aware that they actually got this
Mm,
Bitcoin Cash. So there are all sorts of reasons that could have happened.
mm.
But yes, I did see that about the suspicious Bitcoin Cash transaction.
Yeah, yeah. And just listening to some more points here. I mean, we were touching about institutional demand and all this positiveness. We could even touch on MicroStrategy and their laughable kind of there's a huge opportunity there we've talked about. But definitely Bitcoin now is driven by basically ETF flows, institutional demand. But that's gonna run out as well. So, where are these buyers gonna come from? But then
Yeah,
maybe we can
it's
talk about opportunities like, with Michael Saylor and MicroStrategy that are
yeah,
interesting.
it's become institutionalized, and I don't like the fact that it's become
Exactly.
institutionalized. And there's even talk that the Bank of International Settlements in Switzerland, which is often referred to as the central bank, they have said that they want to start classifying each Satoshi
Mm,
based on its previous transactions to see whether it
wow.
is cleared for AML or not. So it may well be that they then come up with a system that some bitcoins can't be traded at all because they've got some kind of pattern in the past of transactions that the bankers don't like, which again another worrying trend. I don't think that will ever happen because
Mm.
I think it's almost impossible, but it just shows the type of thinking
Of the
that
institutions,
these
yeah.
exchanges have, that these regulators have. and
Yeah.
the exchanges are getting more and more regulated. It's more difficult to get money into and out of the exchanges, to
Yeah.
transfer it to your bank, and so on. So these things are only going to get more difficult, and it's just not what Satoshi and the founders of Bitcoin originally envisioned,
Exactly.
which is sad.
Yeah, and I think just adding to that, Bitcoin's fate is now tied to Wall Street's and Wall Street and basically the US economy, which we have trashed for videos and videos, and I think no one's disagreeing with that. And we have yet to see Bitcoin move on a different wavelength to that as well, and that's concerning as well. If there's a massive crash and
Well,
Bitcoin's not as decentralized as it should be because of the reason we just mentioned just then, another major problem.
Bitcoin and the Nasdaq, if you overlay the charts against each other, it's hard to tell the difference. So
Hmm.
you have to say if the same type of people are investing in Bitcoin that invest in the Nasdaq. So
Hmm.
again, the Nasdaq has had major drawdowns in the past. If you look back to the dot-com crash in 2000, it's had major drawdowns.
Hmm.
And yeah, Bitcoin, as I say, but Bitcoin's not an investment; it's a speculation, because an investment, you would need to have something behind it. You'd have to have some kind of dividend yield. Have to be. It doesn't have any underlying assets in it. It doesn't have a business. It doesn't do anything. It's just it's digits.
Hmm.
So it's a volatile speculation, and it's followed the Nasdaq very closely. So if the Nasdaq has a pullback, Bitcoin undoubtedly is going to follow. Bitcoin may lead, and the Nasdaq falls after. But I think you're going to see the two charts staying very much aligned in the future.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of action points here, I mean, we're not saying, now's the top, although we kind of sort of did sort of have almost like liquidity grab event here where it just sort of very unusually spiked through the recent high and then had a very sharp drop. We haven't seen a sharp drop like that since, when it had
Yeah.
proper corrections, which is interesting. And then I'd be looking at this 200 moving average with that sort of support there. Those wicks down there with the 200 combines probably like a zone of interest. If it breaks below, that could really signify, an end. And that's near the 100K mark as well. So it's another round number. But maybe like, even in terms of other alternative strategies, if it does start to fall, obviously just buying commodities. But yeah, this is interesting as well. Like you can see the 200 moving average here. It's tapping
Nice
it.
chart. Every time it hits the 200 moving average, it's had a very nice bounce.
Yeah, exactly. So in terms of, not wanting to be on the wrong side of shorting Bitcoin's strength, but, and his crazy strategies that Michael
But
Saylor's crazy
it's
strategies.
interesting. Even with Bitcoin reaching all-time highs
Mm,
recently, MicroStrategy hasn't.
it's a good point. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's not been bouncing here. And maybe then now you're looking at outside factors like share structures and loans and things that the company has.
Well, this is this rather ridiculous trend for these companies to become what they're calling Bitcoin treasury companies, and
Mm,
basically all they do is borrow money and buy Bitcoin. And Trump's media company has started doing the same thing.
mm.
And that's where a lot of the demand for Bitcoin is coming from.
Yeah,
So
it's publicity basically. Yeah.
what happens when these companies have to stop buying Bitcoin, which they'll absolutely be forced to do when their share prices fall.
Yeah, exactly. And here you can see like this is definitely a zone of interest. We're right on it as well. I'll be very curious to see if, this starts to fall down. I mean, when these sorts of if maybe some of these companies fall before Bitcoin and then they have to sell their Bitcoin or the
Well,
US economy crashes
it,
and the Nasdaq crashes, more stress on Bitcoin. So
yeah,
yeah, these are
it
things to
already has. I mean, but when did MicroStrategy peak, Hector? It was quite a few months
2024.
back.
Yeah, it was quite recently and what was very
So
interesting.
it's nowhere near its all-time highs.
Yeah, but it's also a beautiful chart. I mean, we're not going to deny that. I mean, I
Oh
love
yeah,
things that are very easy to trade. I mean, you could even be trading both ways and be like, okay, I'm
yeah.
still going to go, still long this, but as soon as it breaks these levels, I'm down to short this. Like, even if it was all the way down here, to keep shorting it might be
Oh,
the end.
as soon as I was under the 200 moving average, I
Mm.
would say get the shorts on.
The Bitcoin dominance chart. I mean, as we were saying, this is going to signify when things really start to flatline for Bitcoin and other things maybe take over, or there's just a general crash all over. But it's got below its 200. It's come below. It's bounced off of the 200 here once, twice, and now it's in a free fall. Well, what it looks like. I
Mhm.
mean, sure, it got below here, but it didn't. Here, it actually didn't have those bounces off the underneath side of the 200, whereas we have had here, which is deeply concerning. Bear in mind, it has been a trending trending line for it. And the last time we had a major crash, 2021 was when Bitcoin fell all the way back down to 16,000. So we have to be watching these things, and it's just backing up.
I've actually never seen that chart before. It's a nice chart. I like that one. And it's saying that Bitcoin dominance is falling, and it looks to me like it's going to continue to fall.
Yeah, and I think sadly I don't think there probably are ways with different markets, but I don't think there's a way to actually trade Bitcoin dominance chart directly. But I'll have to. There probably is. I'll have to figure it out. But I mean, it just backs up our point. Like, this is falling. Why aren't you in other? Or why aren't we looking at other things rather than the main cryptos? Why aren't we looking at alternatives? Why aren't we looking at commodities even? So yeah, just some interesting thoughts and action points there to finish on. And I think the charts are starting to back up what we're saying. I think the video is well timed. So yeah.
Yeah, we're not saying that Bitcoin's going to start to have a dramatic fall tomorrow. We're saying, look, keep an eye on this in the next few months, and but especially when it falls below that 200 moving average, then you really don't want to be buying Bitcoin.
Yeah, and I think going back to the Satoshi point and where first movers are and what their beliefs were and what were the things that caused them to 100x or 1000x is because they were a first mover and they had ideas that were actually healthy for the world, even though most people didn't think they were healthy. And I think
nobody wanted to buy. I was aware of Bitcoin when it was at 6 cents, but effectively there was no hassle-free way to buy it at the time. So I unfortunately didn't buy it at that level. But I always liked the concept of it and was aware of it. But yeah, the people that did buy it at that level, and more importantly, the people that managed to hang on for a decade, have obviously made a fortune, and deservedly so.
Yeah, and then I said to you about how I was aware of it very early as well. My gamer tag on my Xbox was called Crypto Sniper before crypto had basically, it must have been around that as well. But I got put off by a blooming meme, which I might put at the front of the video, which was the BitConnect guy screaming BitConnect, and it was just it just felt, I didn't realize that it was so much separate from Bitcoin, so I assumed that the whole thing was just a sham, and didn't look any more into it. But now I partly blame that video for not getting in, but
it's very difficult to hold anything. I'm not just talking about Bitcoin, but anything that doubles, trebles, goes 10x, 20x, 30x. When the temptation to sell is overwhelming. So great for the people that manage to hang on.
Yeah.
In a bull market, if you talk to brokers, they'll say that some of the people that perform best are people who are dead, because they weren't able to trade their accounts. They just kept the money in the accounts and weren't watching it to see what happened with it.
Yeah, I think the key from my point of view, and it's been very effective for me, especially in the small cap space, is you get in something, you let it move. You don't, once it starts to move, it might do like huge percentage move, but I really love the sort of 9 moving average on a daily time frame. If you're there, if you've decided you're going to sell, where I'd be then looking at that 9 moving average. I'll put photos on screen. It's worked well for the main stock market as well. When that breaks, when you've decided you want to sell, and then you're seeing waiting for the next rise and sell. When that breaks, that is an excellent time to feel very comfortable selling investments. That I'd definitely say that's the case, and it's very effective on small caps as well, because these often just have one move and they're kind of just up to the next level and they don't really go any further. So yeah, and that combined with the 200 moving average, which we showed earlier on the Bitcoin dominance chart and Bitcoin charts, definitely things to watch. Often when one on that level, when you fall through the 200 on the daily time frame, it falls to the 200 on the weekly time frame. So without being too complicated, it's just a 9 moving average and a 200 on a daily. And then if you really were trying to buy a dip on something, then you look at the 200 on the monthly. And that is literally how I do my technical analysis. And I think people would normally pay quite a lot of money for that information, but I'm happy to give it for free, because we're here to help everyone.
It's fascinating to watch the charts on different timeframes and how the same patterns emerge on all the charts, even from the 1 minute charts, 5 minute charts, 1 hour charts to the monthly charts, and the patterns are all the same. They're just bigger patterns. So it's absolutely fascinating to watch these fractal patterns.
Yeah, and it's a lot easier to time the market. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on post notifications, and join our Discord chat room linked in the description, so you can see these plays and get in these opportunities when we do.
In the modern world, great leaders resolve their conflicts with words.